is Leslie DeBleek. I'm Communications Manager for Echoes International, and we're here today with the author of our new book, Angola in My Heart. I'd like to welcome Margaret Skea. Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Leslie.
Welcome. Lovely to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
Could you share a little bit about yourself, please, and your work? Please introduce yourself to us.
Do you know, these are the questions I always get. I'm a Christian first and a writer second. And what that means is that my faith underpins and impacts on everything I write, how I write it, and the content of what I write. Primarily, I'm a fiction writer, but I haven't written specifically for a Christian fiction audience because I feel that if I did that, only Christians would read it. And I actually want my work to be, at some level, salt and light. And therefore I write from a Christian worldview, but for a secular audience, primarily historical fiction, and also short stories. So this is a new departure for me.
Yeah, so your current book, Angola in My Heart, could you let us know what this book is about and perhaps give us a quick summary?
This book's the story of Ruth Hadley, who was a missionary in Angola for just over 34 years. She went out when she was 26, left behind a career, left behind the possibility of a sporting career also, and followed God's call to the interior in Angola, in the northeastern corner of Angola, to work among the Chokwe people. When she'd been there just 2 years, full civil war broke out, and the Foreign Office then advised everybody to come home, but she remained because she felt that she couldn't run away. She had to stay with these folk and go through the privations with them, but also try and alleviate their suffering and also continue her work with Bible studies and so on.
Yeah, so the book goes through the whole of her life.
No, it just starts when she arrives in Angola. There are occasional references to her childhood where they are appropriate, but mostly it is the story of those 34 years in Angola, and an amazing story.
Very powerful. And what led you to write it?
I was actually asked by Echoes International if I'd be prepared to write it, and I'd never done biography before, or at least contemporary biography. I'd done a historical biography of the Luther family, but that's quite different. Somebody who's dead 500 years, you're kind of safe to write about them in a way. But this would be a contemporary biography. Everybody that, or most of the people that worked with her, most of the people who knew her, most of her family are still alive. I'd never met her, and I didn't actually know if I could write a biography, a straightforward biography. And when Echoes asked me, I said to them to go away and pray about it for a month. And I'd go away and pray about it for a month. And if at the end of the month, we'd come back and see what happened. And during that month, it was quite interesting because Echoes had contacted Ruth's family and mentioned that they were proposing that I would do this. And one of her brothers got in touch with me to say that his other brother had Googled me and said, Margaret is the best friend that Ruth never met, which seemed to me quite a strong indication that I should do this. And when I looked at Ruth's childhood and upbringing, although I wasn't going to write about them, there were so many parallels with my own life that I felt I do understand where this person is coming from and how she would react to things. And I got some of my family to pray about it as well, and came to the conclusion that if at the end of the month Echoes came back and said, please write this book, that I would do it. Still daunting, still quite a challenge, but I really felt that it was a call to do it. And actually that it was a privilege to be asked.
Now, I know that when you started to research for this book, lockdown hit that COVID word.
Certainly did.
So what impact did lockdown have on your writing process?
Well, ideally, I would have liked to have gone to Angola first at the start of the process, but 3 times I had flights booked that had to be cancelled, rebooked, cancelled, rebooked, cancelled, and finally it was the fourth attempt. So in the interim, I had all Ruth's letters that she'd written to Echoes over the 34 years, and I had some personal letters that she'd written to other people. And so I went through them and started working on them as a kind of chronological account of those 34 years, though I knew I wasn't going to do that in the final book. And I also spent quite a lot of time reading journalistic accounts of the war to get an appreciation of what it was like. It was not the way round I would have wanted to do it. When I finally got to Angola, I had done all the preparation and all the reading and all the masses of notes. And then I got to Angola in June of 2022, and it was a case of trying to patch together what I saw on the ground with what I'd already made notes on and make sense of my notes through what I saw there. But it wasn't the way I would have chosen to do it.
Yes, COVID does that, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So, had you been to Angola before you started this book? What are your impressions of Angola
I'd
today?
never been to Africa at all
Okay.
before I started this book. Angola was horrifying in parts, humbling in parts. I couldn't believe in Luanda that of the 10 million people approximately who live in Luanda, 9 million of them are living in shanty dwellings with no sanitation and no water. And
They still feeling the impact of the Civil War.
no, Angola should be a fabulously rich country with diamonds and oil.
Yeah.
But there's the fat cats who have all the money and the ordinary people who have almost nothing. That I found very, very difficult because I stood in the flat that Ruth had stayed in when she first arrived in Angola, and looking out, you just see miles of shanty dwellings in front of you. And then in the background, you've got the Parliament building and a presidential area that looks like it should be in Washington, D.C. And the contrast is just astounding. And I didn't like Luanda at all. And when I went out to the interior and stayed in Kamundambala village, the folk were lovely. The Angolan folk were absolutely lovely. Again, they have almost nothing. And that was very humbling to see how with almost nothing they are so hospitable and so welcoming and so friendly. I just felt very sad, actually, that the country has not improved any since the end of the Civil War, really. There was an election coming up when I was there, and there were all these big posters and banners saying about how the ruling party, would do everything for the people. And you think, well, 20 years on, they've done nothing. And we know the elections are not fair and free, and the people are not going to get what they should be getting out of that country. And it's rather sad, but on the other hand, it's also beautiful.
It's a very sad situation still continuing. Having finished this book, how has your view of Ruth Hadley changed from when you started?
I don't know if it has changed exactly. I was immensely challenged by her right from the start. And I remain immensely challenged by her. I think what it has done really is allowed me to see more of what God can do with someone if they surrender themselves completely to Him. And clearly that's what Ruth did. It doesn't mean she didn't make mistakes. It Doesn't mean she didn't get things wrong. Doesn't mean she didn't lose the rag sometimes, which she did. But it does show that God can make an immense job out of someone who is willing to be moulded by him.
And you've talked in this interview about being a Christian but not being called to write specifically Christian books. But obviously Angola in My Heart is about Ruth, who's a mission partner working as a Christian in Angola. How did this change of direction sit with you? And how has researching this book impacted your faith?
Well, as I said at the beginning, it was a very daunting task, and I was very concerned that I would be able to meet all the various expectations, because obviously there was Ruth's family and what they wanted from the book. There was Echoes, the mission organisation, and what they hoped from the book in order to inspire other people to mission and to be involved, whether it's in prayer or whether it's actually going in mission terms. And then there was what I have always wanted from all my writing, is that whatever I write will be available to a secular audience and to challenge a secular audience. Normally in a very non-preachy way. This one obviously is very, very overtly Christian. Has to be. And I didn't actually know if I could strike a good balance with that. I hope I have. And it has made me kind of rethink a little bit in terms of the content of what I write from now on. I will go back to fiction, but whether I also do some more specifically Christian books, I'm not sure yet. To some extent, that will depend on the reaction I have from non-Christian readers. If they're prepared to read something that is very overtly Christian, then I may well continue to do some of that. The two books I wrote about the Luthers were obviously very faith-based, but at the same time it was a story. And because they were high-profile people, lots of people have read it who have absolutely no faith at all, or who started with no faith at all. And, you know, that has worked for both a secular and a Christian audience. And I want to continue whatever I do to be in that space between a Christian audience and a secular audience, but always, always, always from a Christian worldview.
That's super. And finally, can you share with me one thing that you hope readers will take away from this biography?
Do you know, if we were very privileged to be allowed by City Alight to put at the front of the book their hymn, which every stanza finishes, "Yet not I, but through Christ in me." And I think that is the message that I would like to come out of that book, that it kind of summarises Ruth's work, and I think it's how she would have summarised herself, that yet not I, but through Christ in me, God can do big things. But through, he chooses to use people. But it's not our strength. It has to be his.
It's a wonderful hymn.
It's a wonderful hymn.
It is. So thank you so much for sharing with us today, Margaret. That's very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.